Plus, she's got sheets. Welcome to our podcast.
Is this the first video podcast of the Netzach Yisrael?
Do we have the link to Madison Square Garden?
That's what I'll see him.
Sold out.
Thank everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. It's a meaningful night for me. You have to excuse me. I'm not used to speaking in front of people. If you don't understand what I mean by that, you will understand in a few minutes. But I do want to thank everybody for coming, and I want to especially thank my wife for not only helping doing the yeoman share of setting up, to be the wives and son heroes of events like this. And I guess I don't know if it's unfortunate, but you know that's kind of the role that they've assumed, to be kind of behind the shadows. And I want to make sure that it's very clear that whatever endeavors I undertake, whatever efforts I undertake, my wife is a complete full partner. At least the good ones. The bad ones are completely my fault. And so I want to thank my wife especially. Now, I realize that this is kind of a different type of Siyum that most of you have been to, certainly that I've been to. So I first want to explain, just to give kind of the overview. I'm going to try to keep this under 3 hours, so don't worry. Just give a little overview as to what the nature of the Siyum is, and then give a couple of thoughts related, hopefully, to the work that I finished, Netzach Yisrael, work by the Maharal, and related to a Siyum and this particular event. So, usually, the Siyumim that we're accustomed to, somebody finishes a Gemara. Certainly every Siyum that I've been to, and it's a little bit unusual, I recognize, to be at a Siyum, somebody finished the work of the Maharal. And in fact, when I was talking to Rabbi Pransky, I was mentioning to him he couldn't make it tonight. But he said, you know, it's probably the first time I've heard of that. And so I even looked into it to try to determine what the propriety is for making a Siyum on something completely different. And when you look through the sources, it really comes out that a Siyum is not just a concept which is related to finishing a Gemara. I also want to mention everybody should feel comfortable to continue eating. If you started eating, continue eating. If you didn't start eating, start eating. If you're sleeping, continue sleeping. If you haven't started sleeping yet, you can start sleeping. But when you look through the sources, it becomes very clear that it's not just finishing a piece of Gemara that's appropriate to make a Siyum for. And in fact, it's not just any sefer per se. Ramosha has a tshuva where he writes, and he brings a number of sources where it becomes abundantly clear that any mitzvah undertaking, any endeavor that you take, which is part of a mitzvah, which spans a long period of time and requires a tremendous amount of effort, and is particularly meaningful, really calls for a Siyum. And this particular Siyum, completing the Netzach Yisrael by the Maharal, has a very profound meaning for me, and I'd like to share. And it's something that there's a reason why, preparing for a Siyum is not an easy thing. It's funny how simchas have a way of doing that. That is supposed to be, we call it a simcha, but it ends up being a very difficult thing because you got to prepare for it and all the logistics and everything. So we're trying to keep it somewhat simple, but there's still a fair amount of work to do. So why did I go through all this effort? And that's really what I want to share with you, and that's why also all of you are here, to share why this has a particularly profound meaning for me. And in order to give an appreciation for why it has this meaning for me, I want to show the genesis of events, kind of go back to the beginning. I'll go back to the very beginning because I think that really starts everything. So, I was born in a log cabin. We're not going to go back that far. A long time ago, and really since, for a while now, since really my yeshiva days, I've had a particular affinity for Jewish thought, for machshava. It's something that's particularly drawn to me. Works of the Maharal, works of the Ramchal, just seeing the underpinnings, the machinations of the universe, just seeing kind of behind the screen how God runs the world, really has a very profound meaning for me, and it's something that really speaks to me personally. I realize it doesn't speak to everybody, but for me it has particular meaning, and it makes my avoda, it just gives it a tremendous amount of significance. So in yeshiva, you've got all the, it seems like you've got all the time in the world to spend on whatever topics you want to, and I was able to devote a fair amount of time to machshava. And once you leave yeshiva, there's a whole new other world, and really for a number of years I kind of struggled with finding time, this common excuse, finding time, finding the right place. And I always had a desire to have some systematic way of going through Ramchal, Maharal, but it always kind of eluded me for a number of years. And the excuses are very easy to come by. I don't have time, I need to do this, I need to do that. And until finally, about 18 months ago, I don't know exactly what it was, about a year and a half ago around Shavuos time, I realized that all these were just excuses. That if I didn't sit down and actually come up with a game plan, it wasn't going to happen. And so I came up with a game plan and I said, I'm going to work on the Maharal, one of the books of Maharal, and I'm going to do it. I just set time for myself 2 years. I didn't know how long it was going to take me. I just said 2 years. Within 2 years, I'd like to complete it. And I even sat down and I said, okay, this is how much I need to do per week. So I actually had a game plan, I had a goal, I had a particular mission in mind. And I chose Netzach Yisrael not for any particular reason. It was just it was there as one of the works that I had never learned it before. So it was a somewhat arbitrary choice. And like any projects that you begin with, I started out with a tremendous amount of motivation, a lot of enthusiasm. You're gung-ho, I was all rah-rah, I was all into it. And for a while I was like, this is wonderful, this is great. But as all projects, at least I know for myself, most projects that we undertake, after a while, things kind of slow down. The train kind of slows down. The inertia wears off. And you're kind of left with, oh, well, okay, the thing's going to go a little bit slower. I wasn't covering as much ground every week. And at one point, I took a look. I said, am I really going to let this happen? Am I just going to let it slide and let it die? And I've had that experience before where I've said, okay, I'm going to do this, and this is it, I'm going to finish it, I'm going to do whatever. And then halfway into it, I just lost the motivation, I lost the enthusiasm for it. And I said, am I really going to let this happen? And I started to think, how can I make sure that this project doesn't die? How can I really motivate myself? How can I really revive this thing?